Near the top of the Royals shopping list is also someone who can hit at the top. Who do we think are the best options? We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. If you're looking for where to find us, very easy to do so, as you can find us anywhere you get your podcast. That can be Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube if you like to watch the video of Locked On Royals. But just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. And you can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. So to go download the app and get started today over at Gametime. Well, I promised in last night's episode that we were going to dive a little bit deeper into what the end of the season press conference had for the fans out there, what we could take away from JJ Picollo and Matt Quatrero, and kind of go along the lines of what we did last night and looking at free agent targets and options going into the winter that the Royals can bring in and bolster this roster a little bit, bolster this lineup. And what I did think was very interesting was when asked about the shopping list, what are the priorities going into the offseason? The first thing that JJ Picollo brought up was getting somebody that could hit at the top of the order and get on base. And I think, in a perfect world, that comes easily. You just identify three guys, high OBP, a guy that maybe was a former All-Star or was good in 2024. You just plug him into your lineup and you're good to go. It's not as simple as that in 2025 or going into the 2025 season. Because in my opinion, there's not a lot of perfect leadoff guys out there. You heard us last night say that there's no perfect option for the middle of the order bat, right? We brought up Tyler O'Neill last night, but there's still a variety of guys out there that would make maybe even more sense than Tyler O'Neill. And maybe in the Royals war room or draft room or just meeting area, they've got him higher on the draft board or lower on the draft board. Who really knows? Or I say the draft board, the free agent board is what I mean by that. But to me, the leadoff position is even more complicated because baseball has really changed its way of thinking on the leadoff spot over the last decade or so. You went from guys that were speedsters at the top, maybe didn't always draw the walk, but put the ball in play, probably were a left-handed hitter, were an outfielder, and that was pretty much the same for a lot of teams out there, that your center fielder led off, or, you had guys like Nyjer Morgan or Juan Pierre or, a Michael Bourne, even before that, a Rajay Davis that could lead off at the top, the base stealers out there. The Royals had Alcides Escobar, guys that could not always work the count. Mainly they were used for their legs, all right, that they could get to first base or they could beat out an infield single or, stretch a single into a double. That was the thought process for a leadoff hitter. And then it transitioned into the big on-base guys. And sometimes, as we saw in Philadelphia, that led to a guy that could run into one. Kyle Schwarber being a good example. There were a couple of times that I believe Anthony Rizzo led off for both Chicago and New York, if I can recall correctly. Baseball has definitely adapted to that the leadoff position is not necessarily the speedster, the outfielder, the guy that can use his legs. It sometimes is the slow power guy that can work the count and get on base, via the walk. Sometimes guys or teams now go with just their best player. Baltimore would lead off Gunnar Henderson from time to time and put a lot of pressure on, the start of the game where you're already having to face the best player in the lineup rather than wait, a few guys down the order. But to me, how the Royals can approach this is pretty simple. When I said it's a complicated spot to identify, who to look at is going to be complicated, but I think you can narrow it down for what you want at the top of the order. You've got your guys that can drive in runs, right? You've got Bobby Witt Jr., you've got Vinny Pasquantino, you've got Salvador Perez. You also don't want a base clogger. So I think you can rule out a guy that would hit at the top of the order like a Kyle Schwarber that could get on base, yes, but also is going to be hitting right ahead of somebody like Bobby Witt Jr., and you don't want to take away his legs, in stretching singles into doubles or doubles into triples, right? You don't want somebody that's going to slow him down in that process. So you can rule that part out. You can rule out the contact guy because that's what the Royals have done for years. And Maikel Garcia, Michael Massey, both contact guys that didn't really work the count. Now, Maikel Garcia would see a lot of pitches at times, but it wouldn't always result in getting on base, not really until the postseason for that matter. Michael Massey's a guy that doesn't really favor the walk. So if you're the Royals, you cut both those options out. You don't want a base clogger. You don't want a guy that's just not going to see a lot of pitches or that's just a high contact guy, low strikeout rate. The Royals have tried that. I think you have to go a different way here. So to me, I think you have to find that perfect, in-between spot for the leadoff guy. I don't think you need a blindingly fast guy at the top of the order. You got that in Bobby Witt Jr. And for that matter, the Royals may look at it and say, Bobby Witt Jr. is going to lead off for us next year. And you go out there and get a number 2 hole hitter. A perfect number 2 hole hitter, though he will be very expensive, is an Alex Bregman, right? Or you could lead off Alex Bregman. That's, getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. But to me, that could be their fix of, hey, Bobby Witt Jr. is not really a walk guy, but he gets on base a lot. When you hit 332, it's pretty easy to do so. But with the number 2 hole, the number 3 hole, you want guys that can drive in the leadoff hitter. And if you do lead off Bobby Witt Jr., you need to find the perfect 2-hole hitter. So I'm not sold that the leadoff option is in free agency. That's kind of the point of this segment today. And we'll have a couple of options to go over. But to me, I'm not sold that the answer to the leadoff position is sitting around in free agency. We could reevaluate when some guys decline the player option, test free agency. I know a couple of people brought up Cody Bellinger to me. But at the end of the day, the Royals may need to look into acquiring somebody else and maybe guys they were interested in at the trade deadline. Luis Rengifo goes against a little bit what I just said of a guy that is a high contact, little power, doesn't really draw the walks. He's just a singles hitter. Luis Arraez, the Royals were interested in, and it seemed like from Luis Arraez's post on Twitter yesterday that his time in San Diego may be done as well. So we'll have to see on that. I'm not sure Luis Arraez is the perfect option either because I'm not really sure, what value defensively he would bring, which isn't a lot. He's a terrible defender and he's a singles hitter, though somebody that can win batting titles, right? So that certainly could be an option. I think you could look into Taylor Ward again. Taylor Ward was somebody I believe the Royals were interested in. Just didn't seem like the Angels wanted to trade away any pieces at the trade deadline. But when I go over these options in free agency, I don't think that Jurickson Profar would be the perfect leadoff hitter. I would rather have him more so in the middle of the order. Tyler O'Neill's not a leadoff bat. He's a middle of the order guy. Michael Conforto could lead off, but kind of a base clogger, if you will. He's not really that quick, and that would be more so of the Kyle Schwarber approach of you got a guy that can draw the walk up there, a left-handed bat, but also not going to move super well. So at the end of the day, if JJ Picollo wants to go out there and get a leadoff hitter, I think the outlet you got to try is through trade. I think that trading for someone is the best possible outcome for something like this because you're also not maybe getting a rental. You could be going out there and getting a young controllable piece for multiple years that can solve your leadoff spot for 2025 and 2026. I guess you could also do that if you go in free agency and give somebody a multiple year deal. I just don't see that right now. I would have to wait a little bit longer until player options are declined and more free agents become available by December-ish. I just don't know if somebody like a Tommy Pham is the answer. Tommy Pham is going to be 36, 37, and I think he wants to be an everyday player, and I'm not sure the Royals would view him as an everyday player, even after some of the success he showed for the Royals in his short time. over the final 2 months of the season. I think you want to have your answer not just for this year, but for multiple years. And going through trade, I believe that could be a really good option. Sometimes, the Royals are looking at guys that we're not even thinking about. Now, that happened to the offseason plans last year. I had no idea the Royals were looking at John Schreiber, and they traded David Sandlin to go out there and get him. I had no idea at the deadline they were looking at Hunter Harvey. So some guys are on their radar. And for the leadoff spot, I think it makes a lot more sense to go through the trade route than it does through free agency, because you could get a big-time impact bat and put a lot of money toward it and then trade a prospect or two for your leadoff hitter. You have to feel out the market a little bit, what a leadoff hitter would go for. I would assume it would be an outfielder because the Royals have a lot of infield spots that are taken at this point in time. But here's a scenario to dream a little bit. What if the Royals put their chips in to go get an Alex Bregman? For this hypothetical, I still give it a very low chance of happening, but they put their chips in to go get 30-year-old Alex Bregman. Now you could put him in the middle of the order, you could hit him near the top, and you could trade for a true leadoff hitter. You don't need to run through this thing again of trying to go get Michael Massey to turn things around at the top of the order, or Michael Garcia. No, you could have a very legitimate 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even a 5 in your lineup if you add a bat like that. You also have to be willing to part ways with some prospects you really like, and that's what J.J. Picollo said at the trade deadline last year. You had, guys that they really wanted, but he felt like if you're going to get somebody that impacts your major league roster, you have to give up guys that you like. That could also be a Brady Singer. I know people have approached me about the idea of trading Brady Singer, fans, of course, not people in the organization, but contemplating that idea. If Brady Singer is an option to trade, I would try to get value for a leadoff hitter. If somebody needs a number 3, number 4 starter, well, we need a young, controllable outfielder or a guy that can play multiple spots and can lead off for this team. If you want to go with a stopgap approach, let's just find a good leadoff hitter for the now. Jose Iglesias has had a great year for the Mets. He could hit at the top of the order, and he's sort of revived his career, baseball and I guess in the singing world as well, being a pop star in Latin America. So good for Jose Iglesias. Maybe you could bring that to Kansas City. So there are options to look into, but this segment is more so to me about, I believe the trade route is going to be better than free agency. Because right now, going through the options, going through the list of guys, I'm not sold there's a great leadoff option. I think the Royals need to find that happy medium of a guy that isn't a base clogger, but also isn't that just put the ball in play type of leadoff hitter. You want somebody that can at least handle his own on the base paths and can get on base at a high clip. I don't need somebody that's only seeing 3 or 4 pitches at the top of the order. Need somebody that can work the count. If you find somebody that hits 240, but his OBP is to 340, 350, there's your answer to me. If you can find that, I think the on base you need at the top of the order has to be above 330. Maybe somebody like a Jesse Winker could make sense, another Mets guy. So those are options free agency and trade-wise that the Royals could look into. But to me, at the end of the day, I do think that it's going to be more so of a trade outlook than free agency, because at this point in time, I'm not sold that free agency is the best route to go, considering who's out there for the leadoff spot. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I've gotten some questions on Kyle Wright. Will he make the rotation in 2025? And what's his role going to be next year for the Royals in coming off injury? That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. I want to give a shout out to our title sponsor today in Gametime. Though the Royals season is over, there's still a lot of time to use Gametime, whether you be going to football games, NFL, college. I'll actually be out in San Francisco coming up this weekend, going to the Chiefs and the Niners. And you guessed it, I bought my tickets on Gametime. Got that all under control. Didn't have to wait around to get those tickets. It's just very easy to use it. And if you're looking ahead to college basketball, or maybe you're an NBA fan, don't wait around. Go see what deals they have right now on some of those games for basketball season. The hottest deals, the cheapest deals. Gametime is going to have you covered. So here's what you need to do. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I do think that there's a lot of hope and a lot of optimism for Kyle Wright coming into 2025. But to me, I do think that we are setting the expectations a little bit too high for a guy that isn't coming off Tommy John, isn't coming off an elbow injury or a knee injury, nothing like that, where sometimes guys come back and it's seamless. Chris Bubich, a perfect example, recovering from Tommy John and then becomes a setup guy for a playoff team in Kansas City. Kyle Wright is a much different case here, and it's not that he can't have success. But I got a question last night, and I thought it would be a good idea to address it in today's episode. Kyle Wright's recovering from a shoulder injury, and shoulder injuries, in my opinion, are much tougher to recover from because sometimes it really can change your overall repertoire as a pitcher. Your velocity can really dip in trying to build your arm back up, and there's always that chance of re-injury. And that's something Kyle Wright has struggled with in his career. He has not been a super durable arm, and the Royals value durability in their rotation. It's why they had so much success in 2024. Very few guys miss starts, and if they did miss starts, it wasn't for an extended period. So when you're looking at the 2025 rotation, I'm not sold that Kyle Wright is the answer because of 1 year, now 2 full years ago. His 21-win season in 2022 as a 26-year-old in the Braves rotation. There is a chance that he comes into spring training and he does dominate. He looks really good, and you can absolutely entertain that idea of being a number 5 starter. But what we heard from J.J. Picollo yesterday, I thought really stuck out to me. He said if Michael Wacha goes and tests free agency, that they would go into free agency to look to replace him. That would be their course of action. So Cole Reagans is coming back. Lugo's coming back. I didn't get the feel, even though I brought it up in the first segment, that Brady Singer would be traded. But to me, I would expect him at this point in time to be back. So there's 3 guys. I got no reason to believe that Alec Marsh is getting moved to the bullpen full time. So I would expect him to be the number 5 starter. And then it's either Michael Wacha or it's somebody in free agency. And Andy Rogers, beat reporter for MLB.com, covering the Royals, did a great story on today about the Royals' interest in bringing back Michael Wacha, which there's a lot of it. They want to run back this same group. So that automatically would put Kyle Wright on the outs. But when you're dealing with somebody that is coming off a season-long injury, and a little bit longer than that because he missed pretty much the entirety of 2023. He only appeared in 9 games in that season, and he had a 6.97 ERA. So it wasn't a good year. That was coming off his 30-start, 3.19 ERA, 21-win season in 2022, and he follows it up with a bad year, gets hurt, misses the majority of 2023 and all of 2024. So that's what you're dealing with right now. A guy that hasn't pitched in the big leagues in a long time. Here's the other part of it, and why I'm not sold that if he is healthy and he looks good, that he's just going to be handed the number 5 spot. As much as you would love Kyle Wright to be the 5th starter and have a 21-win season, that's a pipe dream to me. Because here's the rest of his numbers in his big league career. If you took out his 21-win season, his other 5 years in the big leagues, he's got an ERA north of 7. He had an 8.69 ERA in 7 games in 2019. In the COVID year, he made 8 starts, had a 5.21 ERA. In 2021, he made only 2 starts at the big league level, a 9.95 ERA. And then in 2023, a 6.97 ERA in 9 games. The other part to this, he has only appeared in 40-plus innings or thrown 40-plus innings once in his career. In his 6-year career, he has thrown over 40 innings 1 time. And it was that outlier, 180 innings in the 21-win season in 2022. The year the Braves made their deep run into the postseason and won the World Series. That's what Kyle Wright did in that outlier year. So the question becomes, what's the outlier? Is it that 30 start season, 21 win season? Or are the outliers all these other years of not appearing in a lot of games, being banged up, having season ending surgery, having a high ERA? That's for the Royals to decide. And another part to this, in his career, though a much smaller sample size, I think he's only thrown 14-ish innings out of the bullpen. He's got better numbers and a higher strikeout rate out of the bullpen. And when you're coming off a shoulder surgery, the Royals could look at this and also compare it to Kris Bubic's situation and say, Kris Bubic missed basically all of 2023, and he came back and was great out of the bullpen. That's the best Kris Bubic has ever looked. They could look at Kyle Wright and say, if he's healthy coming out of camp, maybe we can tap into something out of the bullpen. Because expecting a guy to start 30 games for you again or 25 games for you, I need a little bit more than one of 6 seasons throwing over 40 innings. I need a little bit more than that. And I think the Royals know that, and J.J. Picollo understands that. When you put somebody in the rotation, it's not always about he's got great stuff, he's got great numbers. Part of those numbers is durability. If you can count on a guy every 5th day to make that start, that may be the most important aspect of a number 4, number 5 starter. You're not asking that guy to have a 2.5 ERA in 200 innings. You're expecting that guy to give you 25 to 30 starts. I don't think you can do that with Kyle Wright right now. Because when you're dealing with somebody coming off an injury like this, the first goal is making sure he's healthy. And I'm sure Kyle Wright feels good. I believe toward the end of the season, he was throwing some live bullpen sessions and getting back up on the mound. I could be wrong on that, but I think there was some progress on it. But to me, if they can get him through the offseason and spring training healthy, that's step number 1. That is the most important aspect of this. Really, in spring training, if he's healthy and the numbers don't look good, I don't care. I think he could go down to the minor league level in AAA, get some work in, and then you can reevaluate in a month or 2. The second part of that to me is the numbers, how he actually looks. If he stays healthy, then the stuff starts to come around. Then you can get into that third option of, okay, can he fit into this roster? Can he find a spot in this bullpen? Can he help us? And that's going to be the third and final spot to it. But right now, I'm going to be shocked if he breaks camp with the team in the rotation. He could make the team out of the bullpen in a long relief role or maybe a shorter middle relief role. But that also is the third part of that. He's got to show that he's healthy. And in camp, he would have to show the stuff and the numbers. So it's an uphill battle. But I also think it's a long game here. They don't need to rush Kyle Wright. Even though he missed all of 2024, and I'm sure he wants to get back out there, you got to make sure he's healthy. Then you got to see if the numbers are there. Then you got to know if there's a spot for Kyle Wright in 2025. But that's the question they're going to have to ask. What's the outlier? Is it 2022, or is it the 5 other years being the outliers because he didn't get enough time to pitch at the big league level? A lot of those seasons were derailed by injury or just not being in Atlanta for that long. But the 1 year he stayed for the entire year, he finished 10th in Cy Young voting. But that's also going to be 2 full years removed from happening when the Royals begin camp in 2025. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll talk about the 4 Gold Glove finalists for the Royals in 2024. Who do we think is going to win, and who do we feel like was snubbed? We'll talk about that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor today in FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And yesterday, I gave you the Garrett Cole pick that I think in tonight's game, he's going to go over his inning total. I'm going to now look ahead a little bit further to the Mets and the Dodgers. I love the way that Francisco Lindor has been playing. Had the leadoff home run in Game 2, a win for the Mets. Now they head back to Citi Field for 3 games where the Mets will try to take an advantage, hopefully, in these next 3, if you're a Mets fan, of course, and take a 3-2 lead or maybe even win the series in New York. I don't know. That feels like a stretch. But taking at least 2 of 3, so you'd have a 3-2 advantage going back to LA. But for game 3, I'm going to take the over on total hits for Francisco Lindor. He's red hot right now, and I expect him to keep rolling in the NLCS. It came out today from Rawlings of all the Gold Glove finalists, and to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of Gold Gloves anymore. I think it's just a little bit, overrated. I think they look at the wrong things. They use the wrong metrics, and a lot of guys are out there that just, you question how they're a Gold Glover, but it sounds nice. I compare it to being a Pro Bowler in the NFL. When you're a Pro Bowler, it sounds nice, right? When a guy retires in the NFL and you hear 10-time Pro Bowler, it sounds nice. Oh, that guy must have been great. And they were great. If you're a Pro Bowler, you're a good football player. But I think a lot of guys would tell you being an All-Pro is far more important. And I view it as being far more important. It's not really close. If you're a 5-time All-Pro, then I would take that over being a 10-time Pro Bowler. In the same way that when you are a baseball player and you are known for your defensive abilities, Gold Glover sounds nice. Omar Vizquel, how many Gold Gloves he had, being a Platinum Glove winner. Alex Gordon had that as well. It has a nice ring. If you're a center fielder or a shortstop and you got 7-time Gold Glover, Frank White had many Gold Gloves in Kansas City, it just has a nice feel to it. It sounds nice. But I'm not sure it's the end-all, be-all. It depends on what you look at. Outs above average, sabermetrics, stuff like that, the advanced analytics for a defender, what really shows the ability of somebody in the field. But the Royals do have 4 players that are up for a Gold Glove award, and I'm confident that at least one of the pitchers is going to get a Gold Glove award, because in the American League side, Seth Lugo and Cole Reagans are up for Gold Glove awards alongside Griffin Canning of the Los Angeles Angels. I would imagine Lugo or Reagans gets that. Freddie Fermin is up for a Gold Glove award instead of Salvador Perez, though that's not too much of a surprise. Freddie was far more elite behind the plate this year than Salvador Perez, so good for him. Fermin will be going up against Cal Raleigh of the Seattle Mariners and Jake Rogers. That might be an uphill battle for Freddie because he was a backup catcher, and as good as those numbers were, Cal Raleigh and Jake Rogers are both starting catchers for the Tigers and the Mariners this year. Nicky Lopez, former Royal, is up for another Gold Glove award at second base. No Michael Massey because he wasn't healthy the entire year. And Bobby Wood Jr., of course, is up for a Gold Glove award. His competition is Anthony Volpe of the New York Yankees and Brian Rocchio of the Cleveland Guardians. So there's the 4 Royals up for a Gold Glove award. Kyle Isbell is not up for the center field award. And looking at it right now, the options for center field are Jarren Duran, Dalton Varsho, and Jake Myers. So Duran of the Red Sox, Varsho of the Blue Jays, and Jake Myers of the Houston Astros. No Kyle Isbell. From all the comments I've been getting, that felt like the biggest snub of any Royal out there. Michael Garcia, I think, would have had a chance, but then in the second half of the season, he's bouncing around between third and second base, and he's not playing every single day, and they factor that in. Sometimes when you're just not an everyday player, other than catcher, because, of course, Freddie Fermin is in there as a Gold Glove finalist, it's hard to overtake an everyday third baseman or an everyday shortstop or an everyday second baseman. But with Michael Garcia, I mean, he played in 157 games this year, but he bounced around a little bit. He played 3 different infield positions this year, and that can hurt your chances. It's why Whit Merrifield never really had a chance to win a Gold Glove for a lot of years in Kansas City, because he played second, he played right, he played center, he played left. He bounced around a lot. He played first a little bit. But if you do play in a lot of games, you just hope it to be at one position. But Kyle Isbell, to me, should have at least been a finalist there. I know those are great defensive center fielders out there, and Myers, Jarren Duran, and Dalton Varsho. But Kyle Isbell, I think, had a really good chance to do so. I mean, he almost played in 140 games. I think, in my opinion, that's enough to make a case to be a Gold Glove finalist. And that's what Kyle Isbell's known for. So that's what I think hurts the most for a guy like Kyle Isbell is, he makes his name for being a above average defender in center field. Freddie Fermin gets the nod. He played in the 111 games this year. He's known as the backup catcher, but played a lot more than a backup catcher typically does. But he's known for defense. So he gets that nod. Whereas Lugo and Reagans, they're not known for fielding. They're known for strikeouts and throwing 200 innings. Gold Glove is important to them for sure, because you can add that to the milestone, if you will. You can add that to your decorations at home, the shelf in your office. You can put that Gold Glove up there. And with Bobby Witt Jr., Gold Glove I think would be important. He's also going to be an MVP finalist, and he's going to finish right behind Aaron Judge, so he'll be second in MVP, but he's the superstar, right? It sucks for Kyle Isbell because Kyle Isbell is known for defense. He's not known for offense. And just to get, a nod to that, being tossed a bone, hey, even if you don't win it, you're one of the best defensive center fielders in the American League. I think it would have been nice to see, because I thought Kyle Isbell was phenomenal out there. I wasn't sold back in April that he was going to be the everyday center fielder, not with the way that Drew Waters was hitting and his defensive abilities. But the Royals stuck with Kyle Isbell the entire year. And he came through a couple of times in the postseason. He had great defense out there. And the Royals care about that. Ever since Lorenzo Cain left, they've been looking to have a guy that wasn't a stopgap center fielder. They went with Michael A. Taylor. Great defense, not really known for the bat. Kyle Isbell, you always wondered about his durability and if that offense could come around. And it still really hasn't. But when you play that good of defense in center field, it makes you incredibly valuable. And you can win a lot of games with just a defensive first outfielder. But I do wish that Kyle Isbell would have had a chance to be a finalist for the American League side. But I also think that the center field options are really good as well. If I had to make some predictions right now, I think that Seth Lugo is going to win the Gold Glove for the American League pitcher. And I think Bobby Witt Jr. is going to win the Gold Glove for shortstop in the American League. I don't see Freddie Fermin winning. And I do not see Cole Reagans winning, of course, because Lugo would have won that Gold Glove award. But those are the finalists per Rawlings. The Royals got 4 guys in there. Could have had more because they had such great defense this year. But now it's a wait and see of who's actually going to be a Gold Glover come 2025. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB as baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every aspect of the playoff picture. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to do another deep dive into free agency, but maybe more so on the pitching round. Who's a bullpen guy or two that I really think could take this group to the next level? That'll all be coming up tomorrow in another edition of Locked On Royals. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.